I'm Larry Walther. This is principlesofaccounting.com, Chapter 8. In this particular module, we will examine the correct components to include in inventory, what costs are appropriately included in inventory, what items are appropriately included in inventory. Now, this can vary depending on whether we are considering a merchandiser. In a merchandiser, such as a retailer, the goods that would be included in inventory are the goods that are held available for sale to others. In a manufacturer, however, there may be multiple categories of inventory. There are the raw material components that will be assembled into or used to be processed into a completed unit. Another category is known as work in process. These are the goods that are actually in production. If you can imagine assembly line operation, it's the product that's going down the assembly line having the components added to it. And then the finished goods would be the goods that are completed through the production cycle and awaiting sale to a customer. Inventories are typically classified on the balance sheet as a current asset, no matter which category and type of company we're speaking about. Now, another issue is goods in transit. You were previously exposed to this topic in Chapter 5, where we looked at the handling of freight cost. It now becomes relevant again to consider that subject, though, to determine who would include goods in inventory when those goods are on a truck being shipped from one company to another. The goods belong fundamentally to the party holding legal ownership or legal title to the goods. And that title or ownership in the United States is typically determined by reference to the F.O.B. terms. F.O.B., free on board. Internationally, other terms are used to describe this process. There's some discussion about that in the textbook as well. But under the F.O.B. terms, note that goods sold F.O.B. destination do not belong to the purchaser until they arrive at their destination. So while they are in transit, they remain the goods of the seller. Goods sold F.O.B. shipping point become property of the purchaser once shipped by the seller. So in this particular example, the party in green will include the inventory on their accounts. The seller selling F.O.B. destination would include in their inventory the goods on the truck in transit. They don't become the property of the buyer until they arrive at the buyer's location. Conversely, F.O.B. shipping point, once they're shipped from the seller, those goods belong to the buyer and would be appropriately included in the buyer's inventory. Now, consigned goods is another topic. Consigned goods are products that are in the custody of one party but belong to another. The party with physical possession is known as the consignee. The consignee has a responsibility to care for those goods and try to resell them to an end customer. The consignee, however, does not own the goods and should not include the goods in their inventory on their financial statements. They'll have the goods in their inventory physically, but not in their accounts within the accounting records. The consignor is the party holding legal ownership or title to the goods, and the consignor would include those goods in inventory. In actuality and practice, great care must be taken to correctly identify goods that are consigned out to others as well as goods that are consigned in. It's very problematic in assessing what inventory actually belongs to a company because there's a presumption or an inference that physical custody corresponds to ownership, but that's not always the case when consigned goods are present. And so, as an example, maybe an auto parts manufacturer has maybe transmissions or some large expensive part and wants those in the retail channel. Maybe an auto parts store does not want to stock those goods, maybe doesn't need that amount of money invested in inventory, but agrees to hold those goods on consignment so that if a customer comes in seeking a particular part, they have it available to sell. So those goods would remain on the books of the consignor until sold by the consignee, at which point the consignee would collect the sales price, keep their part, and then pay for the goods, paying the consignor since the goods have since been sold to a final customer. So here we have a picture to illustrate this. The consignee has physical custody of the goods, but the title remains with the consignor. And so this concludes our consideration of costs and issues related to determining what goods are included in inventory.